Hello students, so we are back here again with the part number 2 of the chapter The Little Girl. I am your teacher Shyam Panchal, and as you know that I am going to give you this lecture on behalf of Takshila Model Senior Secondary School. So students, this is name of the chapter is The Little Girl. We have already discussed part number 1 of this chapter in the last video, right? So in this video we are going to discuss part number 2, and I suggest you to open your books, right? So we will start reading from paragraph number 7, which is available at page number 35, and we'll cover the text available at page number 37 and paragraph number 12, right? So students, before we move ahead, let us just take a recapitulation of part number 1. In part number 1, we read about little girl Kezia, how she uh, how she was treated by her father, and what were her feelings about her father, right? So first of all, we read about Kezia's father's routine, what he actually did whenever he left for his office, and how he actually reacted whenever he came back home in the evening to Kezia's actions, right? And what actually he did in the evening. He used to ask for his tea first, newspapers, and for his slippers, right? And he also used to ask Kezia to take off his clothes, take off his boots, right? So later on we came to know how Kezia's father's birthday was there, uh, and it was Kezia's grandmother who asked her to prepare a gift for Kezia's father, for her father, right? And Kezia tried to make a gift for her father. It was a pincushion. She succeeded in making this pincushion, but she made a mistake. The mistake was, in order to stuff the pincushion with some scrap, she tore her father's speech for the Port Authority into pieces and stuffed her case with those pieces of paper. And it was Kezia's father who uh, became very angry with her, and he called Kezia downstairs. So this is where we ended the last last part of this chapter, part number 1. So now let us start part number 2 from this very uh, point, right? So it is Kezia's father. Actually, I'm narrating this story in present tense, right? It was recapitulation that I explained to you in past tense, but I am still going to continue the same phase or same rhythm that I was maintaining earlier. So students, it is in this part, it is in the paragraph number 7, we come to know that Kezia's father uh, is quite angry with Kezia. He is quite furious over Kezia's action. And what was Kezia's action? Kezia's action was that she tore her father's speech for the Port Authority. It was a very important speech, and the father needed it immediately, right? It was very urgent for him. So Kezia just goes near her father, and her father first gets infuriated, gets very angry, and then asks Kezia's grandmother to take her away to her bedroom, right? And Kezia's grandmother just takes her away to her bedroom. What happens then? Kezia's father then goes to Kezia's room. Kezia, who is still sobbing, she is weeping, she is crying and sitting on her bed, right? And she's lying on a bed, and there is a window in the room, and the darkness, the light of the moon is falling into the room, and it is just creating a very sad pattern on the floor. And Kezia is just crying. The environment is quite sad inside the room, right? And during this situation, during this moment, at this time, Kezia's father comes into Kezia's room, and he has a stick in his hands. What happens? It is Kezia's father asks Kezia to uh, sit up. She just sits up at her bed, on her bed. And what happens? Kezia's father commands her to take her hands out so that he can beat her. Kezia is so afraid, but she cannot do anything. She is just feels like a subordinate person. She feels like a very helpless person who has nothing to do, right? And she just uh, uh, takes her hand out, and it is Kezia's father who just uh, beats her with the stick. The stick comes flying onto Kezia's little pink palms, and Kezia starts crying, weeping. So father is in great anger. He just beats Kezia and goes away, right? And students here, I just want to tell you, it is you might just feel that whatever Kezia's father did was wrong, and he should never have done this, right? Yes, you can just think so that Kezia's father action was not justified. He should not have done this. But sometimes it happens that in order to teach a lesson to someone, especially uh, to young children, sometimes we need to be somewhat strict, right? So Kezia's father wanted her not to touch the things which did not belong to her, right? And that is why he just wanted to teach her a lesson. I'm not saying that this action is justified, but sometimes we should be little bit strict in order to stop our young ones from making mistakes, but not that strict that we should beat them, right? So students, uh, here Kezia's father goes away after beating her, and Kezia has now developed somewhat more fear in comparison to the previous time, right? So what happens hours later, it is Kezia's grandmother who comes, and she just wraps Kezia uh, in her shawl, right? And it is Kezia who just sticks up to her grandmother, and she starts weeping by putting her hat on her shoulder, right? And it is when Kezia just asks a question which is very important, right? And Kezia just asks to herself, why does God make fathers for? Why does God make fathers for? This is the question. Why did God make fathers for? This question is written in past tense in your text, right? So why does God make fathers for? This is the question. So Kezia now believes that her father is actually not like any other father, right? She believes that her father does not love her. She believes that her father does not treat her with affection, right? So Kezia just asks to herself, why did God make fathers for? She believes that there is no mm, use of a father. A father should not be there. A mother or a grandmother is enough. This is her personal feeling, right? So days passes, many days passes, and now Kezia uh, starts fearing her father uh, even more than before, right? Whenever Kezia goes near her father, she just uh, takes both her hands back. Uh, she just tries to avoid her father's company, and she just hides her hands from her father. She's under impression that her father will again beat her pink palms, little pink palms, right? Palm means this part of your hand, right? So Kezia is now quite frightened. Now we are. I'll tell you about one more episode that is available in the chapter. Right? What happens that one day when Kezia was in the garden, she was just one day when Kezia is in a garden, she has nothing to do, and she just goes over to the fence. What is a fence? A fence is a boundary. A fence is a boundary. Boundary. Maybe it is a boundary made of wires. Maybe it is a boundary made of bricks, right? Or some wooden plank. Means it is just a barricade. It is just some obstruction to part the boundaries, right? So she just goes near to the fence, and through one of the crack or through one of the gap, in the fence. She tries to peep through it, and she sees what? She sees her neighbors, the McDonald's. So Kezia's neighbors are the McDonald's. So the McDonald's live just next to Kezia's house, and there are 5 children in the family. So Kezia sees that Mr. McDonald is playing with his children. Kezia sees that the little boy Mao is just clinging onto his shoulder, sitting on his shoulder, and 2 little girls are just hanging from his coat's pocket, right? And Kezia also sees that one of the little child uh, has just done what? He has just turned the hose on his father. Hose, what is hose? Hose is a pipe, especially through which water runs, right? Especially we use hose for filling big water tanks, or for irrigation also, which is added to the fields, right? Which is connected to the fields or to the little canals. So Kezia sees that one of the child just uh, turns the hose on his father, and when father runs to catch him, they just laugh happily, right? So when Kezia sees this scene, she is filled with sadness. Why is she filled with sadness? Because she starts comparing her father with Mr. MacDonald. She believes that MacDonald is a very good father, but her father is not like Mr. MacDonald, and she wants her father to be like Mr. MacDonald, right? So this is at this point of the chapter, Kezia just comes to the conclusion that all the fathers in the world are not alike. There are different fathers in the world, right? So students, now it is the last episode of this chapter, uh, which is very important. And in this last phase, in this last part of the chapter, we come to know how Kezia's understanding uh, change, or how Kezia's opinion, how Kezia's perception of a father changes from fear to understanding. Now, as in the beginning of the chapter, when I was explaining to you about the title of the chapter, or I was just telling you about the message the chapter gives, right? So I told you that it happens that in childhood we just uh, feel that our parents' attitude or actions towards us are just not justified, right? But it is later on when we grow up we come to know that those actions were actually meant for our betterment, were meant for our well-being, right? So students, here it is in the last part of the chapter we come to know that it is Kezia's mother who falls ill, and Kezia's grandmother just takes her away to the hospital. It is Kezia who is all alone at home, right? Uh, Father is also away to work, and there is only one person, and this person is Alice, the cook, the family cook, right? So Kezia is alone with family cook Alice. Now Alice tries to make Kezia feel comfortable throughout the day, but as soon as the darkness falls, Alice just goes to put Kezia to uh, her bedroom, and Kezia just pleads Alice, or uh, asks Alice not to go away because she often has nightmares, right? But Alice reassures Kezia and goes away from there, right? So Kezia is all alone at night, and what happens? The same fear, the same uh, thing happens with Kezia. Kezia has the same nightmare. She sees that there is a butcher. A butcher? There's a butcher. A butcher is a person who hacks the animals, right, with a very big knife. So Kezia sees that there is a butcher who is having a big knife in his hands, and there is a long rope in his hands, and the butcher is coming nearer to Kezia, right? So Kezia gets frightened, and she just wakes up and screams for her grandmother. But there is no grandmother because grandmother has already gone away with Kezia's mother, who is extremely ill, right? So what happens? Kezia believes that whenever she's alone, she gets frightened, and she feels that uh, things get whispery, right? Whispery is a word here. Whispery means things get whispery. Whispery means sometimes it happens that whenever you are alone at home, you feel that there is a certain sound coming from this corner, or there is certain sound coming from this side, right? But when you reach there, you find nothing. So means a situation of fear, right? This is called whispery. When things get whispery means you feel quite afraid. So Kezia now screams. She shouts for her grandmother. Why does she shout for her grandmother? Because she has a great bonding with her grandmother, right? Kezia's mother has no time for Kezia. Even her father has no time for her. Let me just tell you, it is during Sunday afternoon that Kezia's grandmother always asks Kezia to go uh, downstairs and talk to her parents. She also wants Kezia to fill the gap which is there, which is prevalent there between Kezia and her parents, right? So Kezia when goes to the drawing room, and she finds that her mother is always reading something, and her father is lying on the sofa with a handkerchief covering his face and his legs on one of the best cushions, right? So Kezia just drags a stool and sits there for a long, waiting when her father uh, will wake up. And when her father wakes up, he just asks for the time, right? So there is a communication gap between Kezia and her parents, right? So Kezia has a very strong bonding with her grandmother. So when Kezia feels afraid, she just calls for her grandmother. Uh, Grandmother is not there, but when Kezia opens her eyes, she finds that there is somebody standing with a candle in his hand, right? And this somebody is Kezia's father. Kezia's father picks the little girl in his arms, and he just heads towards his room. He puts Kezia on bed, and he lies beside her. And Kezia, because she was quite afraid, she just snuggles against her father, and she grabs her father's shirt quite tightly, right? And she sticks to her father, and then she realizes that there is nothing to fear, right? All her fear goes away. Even the butcher's story is not going to bother her anymore, right? And Kezia's father just Kezia's father embraces her and hugs her tightly. And Kezia feels that before her father has slept. Kezia now uh, feels the quite toughness in her father's attitude. She feels that her father's body is quite hard. She feels that earlier she considered her father to be like a giant, right? She considers that her father is very giant, and he has very big hands, and he has very big neck, and especially his mouth whenever he yawns. So she compares her father to a giant, right? But now when she is quite close to her father, right, and her father is tenderly holding her in his arms, she feels that her father is no longer a very tough person. She believes that her father is no longer a very hard person, right? And she uh, comes to know that her father is so tired that he does not have time to play with her. She now believes that her father is too tired to be Mr. MacDonald, that her father does not have so much time that he can play with her, and he can also behave like Mr. MacDonald. So Kezia's perception of her father here changes at the end of the story, right? And this uh, uh, Kezia feels a change uh, for her father. She feels that her father is actually a very loving father, but the only thing that he is lacking is that he does not have much space, much time for Kezia. So as students here, we come to know how when we grow up, we come to know that that our parents' action towards us were uh, were not in a very wrong way, or were not very negative, right? So there is a reason behind a certain action of our parents whenever they are going to treat us a certain way, right? So students, this chapter gives us the message that we should always abide by the rules or abide by the instructions that our parents give us, right? And whenever they are going to treat us a particular way and we think that this is quite harsh for us, we should not consider it, because it is the future that tells us that this attitude of our parents in the past was actually not uh, to harm us, right? So students, with this chapter comes to an end, and at the end of the chapter we come to know how Kezia's understanding, how Kezia's perception of her father changes from fear to uh, understanding, right? And she comes to know that her father is the world's best father, right? So students, with this chapter comes to an end. I hope this story uh, was very good, and it was quite inspiring as well, right? So this story gives us a very good message. Being children, being students, it is our responsibility to follow all the instructions and all the suggestions given by our parents. Our parents always uh, teach us the right thing, right? They always suggest us the right thing, and they always do uh, things which are going to help us, which are going to be beneficial for us in our uh, course of future, right? So students, with this, I come to an end with this chapter, and I hope that you will study this chapter once more from line to line, reading all the tags and learn the word meanings. So till I come back with a new chapter, I thank you.